So with Byron, Shelley, Keats, we're moving into what are known as the late romantics, or the second generation romantics. Um, I'm not sure that you know designation, that distinction is overwhelmingly important. I because I think romanticism, what counts is the continuity more than the distinction. Um, but I think one way you can think about the second generation romantics is sort of the romantics among the romantics. That if romanticism represents an emphasis on action and a kind of critical liberation, of irony, as I've just been talking about, radical questioning. So the second generation apply a kind of radical questioning to some of the dogma of the first. Um, in particular, I think a new, what I've already mentioned, the emphasis on sensation. Um, so a new, which is to say, a new version of the sublime. Whereas the sublime and it's interesting to note that Austen is sort of aligned with Byron in this way. It is more aligned with the later romantics in her emphasis on a kind of comic sublime, or approaching the sublime in a comic mode. Whereas Wordsworth and Coleridge, I think, always have an inclination to spiritualize, a kind of chaste or elegiac sublime. Um, the What we see in Byron is, like I was just talking about in So We'll Go No More Roving. It's a kind of a challenging, like, eroticism, almost like teasing, sexual teasing and joking, and that, I think, is really integral to why Byron, it's, I think, fair to call Byron like the original rock star. Like, it has to do with uh, the invention of pop culture, um, which is a culture, embodied culture, material culture, um, and a creative culture, fandom, like a culture of fandom, fanaticism, that's creative. He's inviting readers to explore their imagination, um, by playing this kind of cult, um, uh, idol, pop idol. Like, that's why I compare him to Prince. Like, that he's, um, uh, like a new kind of saint or something. But he's a saint of pleasure, um, and but the sublimity of pleasure that uh, his work is inviting us to explore. And that, that same idea of, like, the unspeakable, um, that which we can only obliquely evoke, is really crucial to Byron's text. And it's a kind of materialism. He refers to, this is the attitude that he's trying to make his readers confess, like, confess that you understand what I'm saying, confess that you're turned on by what you're reading. um, uh, this is the sublime of that sort of writing. Maybe body, but is it not good English? Maybe profligate, but is it not life? Is it not the thing? The thing that is sort of the unspeakable material, enchanted, but an enchantment of pleasure, um, and that's, I think, we're so used to kind of anti body, anti-embodiment, religion and culture. Um, we, it's easy to forget that there's a possibility of, kind of a spiritual experience of pleasure as well as, um, you know, um, grief. Um, um, there's a um, enchantment of the unspeakability of pleasure as well as the unspeakability of um, you know death and remorse and so on. Um, and this is a key theme of the prominent philosophers, 19th century, Friedrich Nietzsche, Sigmund Freud, um, to recognize as a certain contempt for the body as a symptom of Western culture in general. Um, so Nietzsche puts it this way, that going off the idea of philosophers as lovers of wisdom. So it's like, what kind of lovers are they? If you think about it, they're pretty awkward, clingy, domineering lovers. They want to hold on, they want to own the truth and protect it with logical arguments. But that's that's a love that's born of fear, that disguises fear. What would a philosopher be that was an exuberant or expert lover, that was proud of and not ashamed of the pleasure of love. So this it's pretty clever and eye-opening, I think. Supposing that truth is a woman, what then? Is there not ground for suspecting that all philosophers, insofar as they have been dogmatists, have failed to understand women? That the terrible seriousness and clumsy importunity with which they have usually paid their addresses to truth have been unskilled and unseemly methods for winning a woman. Certainly she has never allowed herself to be won, and at present every kind of dogma stands with sad and discouraged mien, if indeed it stands at all. So what I want to focus on here is what I've been talking about in terms of the embodiment and the temporal aspect in particular of embodiment. Seduction is something that happens in time. It's not something you can be certain about abstractly, but like poetry, like music, it's an event, and that's an important other aspect of sensation. Sensation, it has to do with our sensuous reaction to the poetry, but it's like sensation also means event, like transformative event. It's a sensation, pop cultural event. And so that's what I'm trying to emphasize here, is this idea that an embodied knowledge is it has a temporality of embodied life, which is to say transitory, like a song comes and goes. So it's this poetry is really trying to situate us in the moment of sensation, the sensational moment, the moment of sensational experience. If Byron wants to, force his readers or compel his readers to confess, seduce them into confessing an otherwise hidden sexuality. He's also exposing what I was talking about last time in terms of nihilism. the nihilism of, this importune love that or clingy, possessive um, uh, culture, which he talks about here in terms of celebrity culture, right at the beginning of Don Juan. He is he's saying, I want a hero. I want a champion I can believe in, a celebrity, a hero, a popular icon that I can believe in. Whereas why the problem with contemporary culture, he says, is this nihilistic celebration of or celebrities, just a elevation of celebrities just in order to tear them down. It's like we actually kind of hate we have this kind of envy of our celebrities, so we hold them up just to tear them down. So he's saying, he, like, the other romantics, he's returning to a kind of pagan myth or legend, to escape the nihilism of modern culture. I want a hero, an uncommon want, when every year and month sends forth a new one, till, after cloying the gazettes with Kant, the age discovers he's not the true one. Of such as these I should not care to vaunt, and therefore I'll take our ancient friend Don Juan. We all have seen him in the pantomime, sent to the devil somewhat ere his time. Already here, he's suggesting a new way of counting, a true one, a true one. This is already related to what I was saying before about so we'll go no more roving. He's referring to a truth of time, not this kind of bullshit time of knowing and judging and Kant, this empty words. He wants a truth and a time, a new one and a true one, that's embodied and honest about the body. Byron ends that first stanza of the first canto by saying Don Juan was sent to the devil somewhat ere his time. And that's kind of the premise of the retelling of the story of Don Juan, is that it's, rather than Don Juan being a seductive figure, a devil figure that brings out an agent of evil in the world. He turns that formula on its head and shows how everybody else is seducing Don Juan. So it's he's calling out the suppressed reality of sexuality in the culture. So I just want to, it's sort of a preoccupation of mine, as you might have noticed, the use of numbers. And I hope you're getting a sense for why, because it is such a clear index of this functional purpose of poetry. Is like I was saying before, just this is the verse. The point of the poem is just to count through the measures, to in a way release us from the narrative meaning, the conceptual meaning, and reveal a kind of truth in the rhythm, the sheer rhythm of the poem itself. And so hence there are all these, I think this is registered in the preoccupation of romantic poets with new ways of counting, and then ordering, regulating the world. And that's why I'm saying a new one. He wants a new ordinate system. Um, Here we're getting the story of uh, Don Juan's original uh, romance with Julia, um, and she's wedded. Wedded she was some years, and to a man of 50, and such husbands are in plenty, and yet I think instead of such a one, 'twere better to have two of 5 and 20, especially in countries near the sun. And now I think on it, mi viene in mente, ladies even of the most uneasy virtue prefer a spouse whose age is short of 30. Um, uh, so again, I think an embodied kind of counting. So the showing us that numbers are not relative. Like 2 of 5 and 20 is not the same as 1 and 50. Um, when it comes to marriage. Another aspect of embodied um, time, embodied counting, that Byron emphasizes is the environment and climate. Um, so again, this isn't, although it has a kind of facetious, it's I think facetiously playing on its sort of stereotype, this southern countries versus northern countries. Um, Same thing in Nietzsche. Um, there's a lot of, I think, facetious stereotyping, but the underlying point about materialism, that who we are is uh, uh, inextricable from our environment. Um, "'Tis a sad thing I cannot choose but say, and all the fault of that indecent sun, who cannot leave alone our helpless clay, but will keep baking, broiling, burning on, that howsoever people fast and pray, the flesh is frail, and so the soul undone. What men call gallantry and God's adultery is much more common where the climate's sultry." Um, the verse form here, ottava rima, you can tell it has a form of a joke. Like it ends with a kind of couplet in punchline. Each stanza does, um, and so it's very playful, um, and again, a sort of an organization of time in terms of pleasure. Um, uh, and I mean, isn't it? It's so much like rap that way. It's like, um, uh, it's about the rhythm. Like, you um, the wordplay, can be sort of more fast and loose because it's more about the rhythm, maintaining a certain rhythm of the words, rhythm of the speaking. Further on in the first canto, Byron explains this interplay of poetry or tune music and chronology, um, and what chronology leaves out, what history leaves out. "'Twas on a summer's day, the 6th of June. I like to be particular in dates, not only of the age and year, but moon. They are a sort of post house, where the fates change horses, making history change its tune, then spur away o'er empires and o'er states, leaving at last not much besides chronology, excepting the post-obits of theology." So making history change its tune, I think, is a good summary for what Byron's about. Giving a new music, and isn't that what pop music is often about? Like giving a kind of intervening in history by giving it a soundtrack. So that dating is followed by the seduction scene. which is a set of, I don't know, 6 or 8 stanzas that are really terrific. Um, and I just typify this Byronic mix of humor, but also kind of mistakable eroticism, the same kind of momentum that I was suggesting, and so we'll go no more roving. Um, that is, in that poem, it's a momentum that's sort of propelled by evasion and suppression, um, and so the um, uh, a lot of the pivotal and most effective terms in here are uh, oxymorons, or evasions, or ironic, this pure platonic squeeze, uh, a loving languor which is not repose. And he says himself, like in We'll Go No More Roving, I'm almost sorry I e'er began. So I'm compelled by this uh, material momentum that's uh, sublime in some level, like the sun. It's a force, an atmospheric material force. Um, so just notice how much of the the joking and the eroticism are kind of go hand in hand. Speaking of hands clasping, the hand which still held Juan's by degree gently but palpably confirmed its grasp, as if it said, "Detain me if you please." Yet there's no doubt she only meant to clasp his fingers in a pure platonic squeeze. She would have shrunk as from a toad or asp, had she imagined such a thing could rouse a feeling dangerous to a prudent spouse. I'll skip one. The sun set and uprose the yellow moon, the devils in the moon for mischief. They who called her chaste, methink, began too soon their nomenclature. There's not a day the longest, not the 21st of June, sees half the business in a wicked way, on which 3 single hours of moonshine smile. And then she looks so modest all the while. There is a dangerous silence in that hour, a stillness which leaves room for the full soul to open all itself, without the power of calling wholly back its self-control. The silver light which, hollowing tree and tower, sheds beauty and deep softness over the whole, breathes also to the heart, and o'er it throws a loving languor which is not repose. And Julius sate with Juan, half embraced and half retiring from the glowing arm, which trembled like the bosom where 'twas placed. Yet still she must have thought there was no harm, or else 'twere easy to withdraw her waist. But then the situation had its charm, and then, God knows what next. I can't go on. I'm almost sorry that I e'er begun. O Plato, Plato, you have paved the way with all your confounded fantasies to more immoral conduct by the fancied sway your system feigns o'er the controlless core of human hearts than all the long array of poets and romancers. You're a bore, a charlatan, a coxcomb, and have been, at best, no better than a go-between. And Yulia's voice was lost except in sighs, until too late for useful conversation. The tears were gushing from her gentle eyes. I wish indeed they had not had occasion, but who, alas, can love and then be wise? Not that remorse did not oppose temptation. A little still she strove, and much repented, and whispering, I will ne'er consent, consented. So I want to suggest that Byron's using irony and contradiction to, joking and erotic effect, like he did in So We'll Go No More Roving. Um, uh, he's performing his own hypocrisy to evoke an unspoken erotic momentum. Um, and this is a similar momentum of the verse, and this be the verse. Man hands on misery to man, it deepens like a coastal shelf. Get out as early as you can and don't have any kids yourself. So he's telling the story of nihilism, the death drive, the kind of history imploding on itself, and likewise evoking a kind of material reality, underlying that. The When he says they fuck you up, he's talking about, he's evoking pain and bodily, being at one another's throats, and that coastal shelf piling up layer upon layer that's sort of evokes the earth as a repository of generations of pain and suffering. So he's like Byron's evoking this subliminal erotic momentum, embodied rhythm, so is Larkin. This embodied history. But both are assimilating that to the song. The performance of the song itself transcends the narrative that it's telling. And so I'm pointing out this similar, like, joking, or Byron's joking erotic poem, and Philip Larkin's incredibly, joking nihilistic poem, kind of formally are analogous, and I think this. Here's the ending of Percy Shelley's play Prometheus Unbound, which is about the birth of love. Sort of a retelling of the birth of Venus, mythological story. It's incredibly beautiful and touches on a lot of themes from Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, rivalry, vengeance versus love. Love is born in the wake of overcoming vengeance through forgiveness. But he ends on a similar note about the kind of irony of inevitable, inevitable narrative failure. Like, narratives never work out. Failure is inevitable. Just insofar as things always work out different than you expect. The world is chaotic and full of chance. The point of hope is not to be correct, but to express desire and give your desire to the world and see what the world gives back. It's not to be correct. So the way Shelley has this god of chaos, god of chance, which is to say the god of history, the god of reality, Demogorgon, and he ends this dramatic poem, the really beautiful stanza that just speaks so much to the themes that we've been discussing. To suffer woes which hope thinks infinite, to forgive wrongs darker than death or night, to defy power which seems omnipotent, to love and bear, to hope till hope creates from its own wreck the thing it contemplates. neither to change nor falter nor repent. This, like thy glory, Titan, is to be good, great and joyous, beautiful and free. This is alone life, joy, empire, and victory. So it's this endless process of kind of failed hope that the sustains love, sustains life. The activity, the embodied activity of hoping, mediates life and love. That's what it's for, not for fulfilling, manifesting, cashing out its ambition. Here's Botticelli's famous painting of the birth of Venus. So what I'm suggesting is that all these poems, despite their various content, are alike in representing an embodied rhythm or momentum of life, love, suffering, getting fucked up, failing. What's really crucial is the form of the verse. And I just want to suggest, if you look at this painting, it's so gorgeous. It's easy to just get overwhelmed by that. But I want to suggest or to invite you just to notice the way in which it's also evoking different kinds of temporality. Sort of the wind in her hair, these flowers floating in, and then the other god floating along with this cape. But then we have this kind of wave action here. There's sort of different scales of space. See, it seems it's hard to tell if they're on the same scale as this background here. This relative to the shoreline, these trees look gigantic. It's hard to tell if that's like really far away. So there's a kind of interplay of different moments, like the different scales of time or temporality. Sort of, this hair is flowing in the kind of the present moment. It's getting blown, and this is sort of a snapshot, freeze frame of her hair in the moment, whereas this seems to be kind of like floating in slow motion. And again, it's like it is this sort of an internal background in contrast to this present foreground. That in that way, what it's saying about the birth of love is, not just a celebration of beauty, but an interpenetration of different kinds of time, eternity and the present. And I think that's a good way of thinking about what's at stake, and the erotic momentum in Byron's poems. It's sort of different temporalities or interpenetrating. As she said, "I'll ne'er consent." She consented. Like this, it's this disjunction of different levels of time. I think it's interesting to compare then this painting by Caspar David Friedrich, the guy who also painted The Wanderer over the Sea of Fog. This scene is even more abstract. We talked about how that Wanderer Over the Sea of Fog really emphasizes the blank canvas, and just the abstract um, interplay of clouds and stuff. And this is, filled with abstraction. And so, good, great version, picture of the last scene of Frankenstein, or darkness, these kind of just abstract forms. Um, and this wrecked ship underscores the civilizational collapse. But I wonder if it doesn't have sort of a similar uh, representation of different forms of time, different levels of time. I mean, we can, like the hair blowing in the Botticelli, we can see these little pieces up here in front that could be, blown around by the wind. It's such rather fine-grained detail. But then out in the background, there are these structures that could be, unchanging for hundreds of years or whatever. So it likewise, I feel like it for all this abstractness and its sort of subtext of waste and uh, you know barren barrenness. Um, I wonder if it isn't in fact kind of analogous to this in terms of what it's formally doing in the representation of time, representing, inviting the viewer to imagine kind of temporal interpenetration of the eternal and the present moment. I'm suggesting that all these texts, in one way or another, are using writing to evoke a sensation, a sensational experience in the present, and which is sort of like a Frankenstein engineering a body, engineering embodied experience. Um, uh, and sort of reconnecting emotional life and imagination, um, kind of mobilizing the pleasure, desire that is otherwise suppressed or unacknowledged, just like the grief, fear, that is otherwise unacknowledged. This is to say, they're all about kind of opening language up to material realities that otherwise are suppressed or evaded. Details of the material world, realities, of mortal existence, a temporality of um, um, things coming of movement, things coming and going, the passing moment. So here is an amazing little poem by John Clare. It's another poem on the hunting motif a little bit, sort of about a guy just sort of maybe wandering through a field to looking to catch rodents or something, or catch a bird. And he stumbles upon a stranger, something strange, and he has he has a sentimental education in that moment. His perception is rewired. He sees. The poem ends with a vision, looking out over the scene, over the environment, that is evidently informed by the strange surprise that's just happened. So What has he learned? What's the effect of this um, encounter that changes how he sees the mouse's nest? I found a ball of grass among the hay and progged it as I passed and went away. And then when I look, I fancied something stirred and turned again and hoped to catch the bird. When out an old mouse bolted in the wheat with all her young ones hanging at her teats. She looked so odd and so grotesque to me. I ran and wondered what the thing could be, and pushed the knapweed bushes where I stood when the mouse hurried from the crawling brood. The young one squeaked, and when I went away, she found her nest again among the hay. The water o'er the pebbles scarce could run, and broad old cesspools glittered in the sun. What words stand out to you? The words that stand out to me are grotesque, so odd and so grotesque. So they're sort of awkwardly unpoetic words, literal words. It's like I'm trying to write a poem, but I can't even come up with the right words, with poetic sounding words. It's interesting, sort of use of literalism to poetic effect, but I think it evokes something sublime. Again, this struggle for an appropriate word, failed struggle for an adequate word, evokes the sublimity. But it's a horrifying sublimity. It's Frankenstein's creature. It's a body horror. And the final couplet, so powerful. The image of cesspools like that. It's a describes death, like stagnant. Lack of vitality, decay, but transformed into this glittering, that great Wordsworthian word, glittering, that has a kind of rhythm, a rhythm of light, glitter, like and sound. The word, it's like a visual onomatopoeia, glittering. It sounds like how it looks. So somehow, like at the form, what was grotesque, this the grotesque sight of these multiple little baby mice. I think there's something kind of horrifying in that, like numbers, that unexpected large numbers, sort of like an insect nest. That's, I think, the kind of grotesque that he's describing there. But I think that's also transfigured that form of multiplicity, that's uncanny in a troubling way, turns kind of sublime in the image of the cesspools glittering. That form of the multiple, the crowd, a swarm, it's been transfigured by the words of the poem. And so again, I think the poem is working through that, making us register and allowing and framing for us, giving a kind of poetic framing and organization and rhythm to, an otherwise kind of overpowering insight into the material reality.